to or counterproductive to peaceful elections? And I'll leave us to answer these questions, including the panel, after this discussion and hearing from the other panelists. But in my opening remarks, let me say the following: that there are 5 things that I think contributed to the partly violent election campaigns and post-election violence in 2007-2008. These causes are also the reasons for recurrent violence we see in parts of the country, including what's going on in Tana River and parts of northeastern Kenya and parts of and elsewhere. One of these is the weak rule of law. Our rule of law is very weak, and in some places non-existent. Just last night I was watching one of the MPs, Waititu, basically with the OCPD next to him, clearly saying that Maasais should be kicked out of Embakasi and other areas. And he went on to talk about that, and the one who's supposed to be enforcing some of these laws was standing next to him, and you wonder, where is the rule of law? The second reason why we have violence in Kenya and violent election campaigns and post-election violence is the abuse of power by the executive. I do not need to overemphasize this point, but there are many instances when the executive has abused its power. 3, weak electoral laws. Kenya is still one of the very few countries that still has the traditional electoral laws of first past the post, as opposed to the mixed member proportional representation that has been adopted by many countries around the world. That has been a huge contributing factor to violent elections and campaigning that we've witnessed in this country. And 4 is weak governance institutions. This is a major contributor to violence in this country, and it directly contributed to the violent elections and post-election violence in 2007-2008. Nobody wanted to go to the judiciary to seek legal redress that the presidential elections had been stolen, and it was very clear if anybody would have gone to the courts at that time, you can be sure how the courts would have judged. And it's not a coincidence today that the members of the public, the legal fraternity, and Kenyans in general have confidence levels on the judiciary rising to 78% today, rather last week, as it was only 28% in 2007 when the courts would have come in handy and addressed the issue of the stolen presidential elections. Number 5 is inequality and injustices in our country. These are the 5 major reasons why we normally see the kind of violent electioneering or election campaigns that we do have, and post-election violence as we had in 2007-2008. Now, the post-election violence in 2007-2008 was not caused by the alleged stolen presidential elections. What it did, what the stolen presidential elections actually did, was twofold. It triggered the violence and it transformed the existing latent structural conflict into a violent one. I'm now coming back to the media and its role. And I want to submit that the role of the media in contributing to peaceful elections or violence was secondary and it was mixed. Media in itself does not cause violence, neither does it in itself also bring peace. It requires a context. And our context in this country, if you look at all the election campaigns that we've been witnessing since 1992, 1997, 2002, 2007, it has always been based on those 5 issues that I talked about: injustices, weak electoral laws, abuse of power by the executive, the weak rule of law, and weak institutions of governance. Let me just now refocus on this short presentation, and I will do so on the general media, including news media, the new media, where everyone can really be a source of information and can publish any information, lies, insults, hate speech through the blog sites, YouTube, Facebook, and the plethora of media platforms that we do have. And because anyone can publish anything at any time, this is where the mainstream media, particularly the news media, becomes indispensable in publishing correct, balanced, unbiased, and objective news and analysis. You can have a chaotic, violent election even when the mainstream media doesn't exist. And similarly, you can still have a chaotic, violent elections even if the mainstream media works professionally. The media can exacerbate violence, increase the intensity of violence, make it difficult for pre-mediation and mediation efforts that will secure a negotiated settlement. The media can complicate the mediation process, especially with negotiators playing to the gallery and the journalists covering that. Or it can reduce the intensity of violence, time the conflict takes, or the progression on its natural conflict curve, stimulate and increase the time taken to reach a settlement, exposing the filibustering or the difficult negotiators or those uninterested to peace. It all depends on how the media is used. And I will give a few examples here. The media, particularly the vernacular stations, contributed to many incidences of incitement in the election campaigns of 2007, and certainly to the fanning of violence between December 2007 and 2008. The atmosphere was already charged, though. Many people believe and accuse Kass FM to have contributed to the incitement, negative ethnicity and hate speech, which in part contributed to the violence in part of the Rift Valley province, broadcasting to the mainly Kalenjin-speaking audience. Similarly, other vernacular stations such as Kameme, Noro, Shoro FM contributed to the same. I am told that I have only 1 minute to do. Now let me zero in on what I normally observe on numerous occasions on what really constitutes news, and I'm left with not really what most journalists actually, when you have your first lessons in class, what you're trained on, have to cover what is happening, where it's happening, who's doing what, why that is happening, and how that incident has happened. But I see an overemphasis on conflict, cast of character, contradiction, color, and controversy. These 5 elements are what I observe, and I'm sure most of you observe to normally constitute what you see in the news menu. In the evening when you are watching television news, or when you read the news from on the mainstream newspapers, including those that are really not mainstream. And in news production, there is more attention paid to war, victory reporting, as opposed to conflict reporting. News reports in its coverage of elections become more of battle-oriented rather than conflict or competition-oriented. The victory versus oriented versus solution-oriented coverage is what we don't see much of a solution-oriented coverage, but election campaigns are portrayed as battles. There are examples that I would like to give, but I will not. We will have this in our discussion because time is moving. But let me just take 1 minute to have my concluding remarks. That, as I said earlier, some vernacular and local radio and media contributed to hate speech. As far as media freedom is concerned, and contrary to what many might want to believe or meant to believe, it actually does not have enough of it. I say this in the context of ownership of the media and corporate profit motives, political motives and patronage among others, which sometimes or all the times dictate that professional journalists and editors are under constant pressure to satisfy certain reporting lines, biases, or killing the stories altogether. Ownership of and commercial interest of certain media, including the mainstream media, has undermined the independence and integrity of journalists. I will end here, but let me I have quite a number of points here that I would have loved to make, but probably those who are on the panel will make the same points, and we will take on these after the discussion. Thank you very much.